Ethan Carter sat in the security booth of the MacArthur Museum, alone during a violent storm. It was late Thursday night, and the rain outside drowned out the rest of the city, leaving him isolated inside a massive 19th century brick armory. As a graduate student in military history, Ethan viewed the world through a lens of hard evidence. When the wooden floors creaked or the wind whistled through the narrow corridors of the 1840s building, he dismissed it as the predictable behavior of aging architecture. To him, hauntings were usually just a byproduct of faulty wiring and active imaginations. But 3 hours into his shift, the basement security monitor flickered. A shape appeared directly beneath the staircase, dark, motionless, and human. A moment later, a second figure appeared. They stood perfectly still, facing each other in a room Ethan knew was locked from the inside. Ethan checked the logs. No one had entered the building. His rational mind struggled to reconcile the security protocols with the visual evidence on the screen. The emptiness of the building was a fact, yet the monitor showed a presence that shouldn't exist. To understand the weight of this space, you have to look back to its time as the Little Rock Arsenal. In 1864, these grounds were the site of a high-stakes military tribunal for a 17-year-old boy named David O. Dodd. Dodd was a Confederate spy, caught with coded military intelligence. Offered his freedom if he revealed his sources, he chose silence. He was hanged in front of a crowd of thousands, becoming the youngest person executed by a military tribunal in the history of the state. The museum stands on a foundation of unresolved secrets. It is a site defined by a trauma from the American Civil War that was never truly put to rest. Later that night, a sound rose through the floorboards, a low, urgent whisper. It wasn't the wind. It had the distinct cadence of two people in the middle of a heated argument. Ethan stood still, waiting for the building's natural acoustics to explain the voices away, but the conversation continued. He took his flashlight and descended into the basement. Halfway down the stairs, he hit a wall of freezing air. Despite the active heating system, his breath suddenly clouded in the darkness. He swept the beam across the concrete floor and the storage shelves, finding nothing but shadows. Then, a single word was whispered directly into his ear, so close he could almost feel the air move. Ethan retreated to the security station. On the monitor, the two silhouettes were back. They were standing exactly where he had just been, watching the spot where he had stood only seconds before. For a man who relied on physical evidence, the monitor offered a terrifying proof. The recurring nature of these shapes meant his skepticism was no longer a tool for understanding the building. It was a refusal to see what was happening right in front of him. Seeking context, Ethan searched the storage cabinets near his desk and found a folder labeled Basement Reports. It wasn't a historical archive, but a collection of internal memos from the people who had worked here before him. This collection reveals Ethan wasn't the first. A 1974 entry describes a janitor encountering the same two shadows before quitting. The reports show a startling consistency across decades. Independent witnesses who never met all described the same two entities, always facing one another in silence. Among the reports was a recurring rumor of an 1850s confrontation between two officers stationed at the arsenal. While the official records are thin, the story of their dispute appears again and again in the notes of those who worked the night shift. As Ethan read, the power cut out. In the dim red glow of the emergency lights, the museum returned to its original form as a 19th century arsenal. From the floor above, the heavy, rhythmic sound of boots began pacing back and forth. These records suggested the museum functioned as a repository for more than just objects. It held a sequence of events that continued to surface with the regularity of a logbook, replaying a specific conflict for anyone left alone in the dark. Just after midnight, piano music drifted through the hallways, slow, melancholy, and precise. Ethan knew the museum's inventory by heart, and there was no piano in the entire building. This is the nature of a traumatic loop. It's the idea that a high-emotion event can remain etched into a physical space, replaying itself like a recording that the building refused to release. Ethan followed the music back to the basement. As he raised his light, the two figures began to shift, their edges blurred, into a gallery of faces, soldiers and civilians from different eras, appearing and dissolving within the darkness, as if the shadows were a vessel for everyone who had ever suffered in this place. Suddenly, his radio crackled with static. A flat, clear voice told him to get out. Ethan bolted for the stairs, taking them 3 at a time as every light simultaneously blazed on, washing the basement in white light. The building isn't inhabited by ghosts in the traditional sense. It is a physical recording of a conflict that reacts violently whenever the loop is interrupted by an outsider. The next morning, museum management reviewed the security footage. They listened to Ethan's account with skepticism, assuming the storm and the isolation had simply triggered an overactive imagination in a tired young man. Then they saw the frame that changed the conversation. It showed Ethan standing beneath the staircase, but looming over his shoulders were 2 dark, featureless silhouettes. In the next frame, they vanished. The museum's official stance remains that no paranormal activity has ever been confirmed, but the staff still avoids the basement after dark, and that folder in the storage cabinet continues to grow thicker as new reports come in. David O. Dodd died keeping a secret, and the museum itself appears to be doing the same. If this kept you watching, you know what channel you're on. Subscribe for the next investigation.
Subscribe for more horror content.